This is what happened when Angel Reese's knee buckled twice in the same sequence during a game against her former team, and more than a week later, there's still no official diagnosis. Over the next 20 minutes, we're walking through the entire timeline, the warning signs before it happened, the injury itself, what her coach said about it afterward, how it affected her All-Star game appearance, and where things actually stand right now. Everything here comes from confirmed reporting, and anywhere the record is still unclear, I'll say so directly instead of guessing. The footage alone is enough to make Dream fans anxious, but footage doesn't diagnose a knee. So we're slowing this down, going step by step, and separating what's actually been reported from what's just speculation floating around online. Some context matters before we get into the injury itself, because none of this happened to Angel Reese, the Chicago Sky rookie. It happened to Angel Reese, the Atlanta Dream forward, and that distinction is only a few months old. April 6, 2026, is the date the Chicago Sky traded Reese to the Atlanta Dream, sending Atlanta's first-round picks in 2027 and 2028 to Chicago, with Atlanta receiving 2028 second-round swap rights in return. That kind of return for a two-time All-Star tells you where Chicago stood as a franchise, coming off a rough season and a second straight year missing the playoffs. Atlanta, meanwhile, was betting on getting better immediately. Dream fans never got years to build a relationship with her the way Sky fans did. She landed in Atlanta in April, and by July she was already one of the faces of the franchise, which is exactly why an injury like this cuts so deep for that fan base specifically. She'd only just become their player. Reese wasn't a mystery box when Atlanta acquired her. Chicago had taken her 7th overall in the 2024 draft, and her rookie season explains exactly why teams wanted her. 13.6 points, 1.9 assists, and 1.3 steals a night, plus a league-leading, record-setting 446 rebounds. She defended that rebounding crown the following year, too, averaging 12.6 boards a game. That rookie year came with its own injury, and it's worth mentioning here because this isn't the first time Reese has had to make a hard call about her own body. A hairline fracture in her left wrist ended her 2024 season early, the result of a fall on her hand during a play, and surgery followed on September 10, 2024, when doctors inserted a small screw into the bone. 4 weeks in a hard cast came next, then 2 more in a soft, removable one. Reese has talked about that choice publicly, explaining she picked surgery over playing through it because she didn't want to risk arthritis in her wrist at 22. It's a small detail, but it shows she's someone who has already weighed short-term competitiveness against long-term health once before and made the harder call. By the numbers, her first season in Atlanta turned into one of the best of her career. Reese was putting up a career-high scoring average around 15 points a game, adding roughly 11.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, and close to 2 steals a night, and 18 separate double-doubles piled up along the way. July brought her 3rd straight All-Star selection. This wasn't a player limping through a down year when the injury hit. It was the best basketball of her career, happening in real time. 18 double-doubles in a season is a lot, for anyone who doesn't follow basketball closely enough to know what that number means. A double-double simply means a player hits double digits in 2 statistical categories in the same game, most commonly points and rebounds. And racking up 18 of them means Reese wasn't just logging solid minutes. She was dominating the glass and scoring at a high level almost every night. That's the version of Angel Reese who took the floor the night this injury happened. A player at the peak of her production, not one in decline. Atlanta, as a team, had its own roller coaster running alongside hers. Mid-July reports had the Dream opening the season strong at 12 wins and 4 losses, then dropping 5 straight before climbing back to somewhere around 13 wins and 10 losses. Different outlets gave slightly different win-loss snapshots depending on the exact date, so we won't pin on one specific record here, but the broader picture holds steady. This was a competitive team with Reese as one of 3 All-Stars on the roster, and every game she missed carried weight. Before we even reach the injury everyone's talking about, there's something people forget. Reese was already dealing with leg trouble for over a week before the moment that made headlines. A Thursday in mid-July, during a dream win over the Seattle Storm, is when the trouble actually started. Reese exited that game with about 1 minute and 20 seconds left in the fourth quarter, walking off with a visible limp after falling under the basket, and head coach Carl Smesko admitted afterward he didn't know the severity yet, because she was still being evaluated. Atlanta's official injury report listed her as questionable the very next day, citing a lower leg injury ahead of a matchup with the Portland Fire, and she ended up sitting out entirely, her first missed game of the season, in a contest Atlanta lost 102-92. The designation shifted again a day later to a right leg issue, still questionable, this time ahead of a game against the Los Angeles Sparks. She wasn't the only banged-up player on that roster either, since teammate Brianna Jones had already missed most of the season with a knee injury of her own. Heading into the following week, Reese was playing through some kind of lower leg or ankle issue the team hadn't fully explained, and anyone following the injury reports closely already had reason to worry. A nagging problem that keeps getting relabeled, from lower leg to right leg across different reports, usually means the medical staff themselves are still figuring out what they're dealing with. That's the setup. What happened next is the moment that actually triggered the panic among Dream fans, and the reason this video exists. July 19th, 2026 is the night the Dream hosted the Chicago Sky, Reese's former team, and won a tight one, 93-91, on a buzzer-beating layup from teammate Jordan Canada. But that finish isn't what anyone remembers about the game. Roughly 14 or 15 seconds into the fourth quarter, Reese came to a jump stop under the basket attempting a layup, and her left knee buckled underneath her. She fell, got back up on her own, and went down again just seconds later. Multiple outlets, independently of each other rather than one source repeating another, described her knee as visibly bending backward in slow motion. Nobody touched her. This was a non-contact play, and her knee gave out on its own, twice, in the same sequence. That's the replay everyone's been sharing, and it makes sense that it rattled people, because non-contact knee injuries are often the ones that turn out to be serious. Reese never returned to the game, and the Dream officially ruled her out for the rest of the contest. Here's what matters for keeping expectations in check. As alarming as that replay looks, Reese herself didn't seem to be in crisis mode afterward. That same night, she posted on social media celebrating the win, and specifically shouting out Jordan Canada's game-winning shot, writing on X, quote, "Dubs in the MF chat, let All-Star break begin," end quote, complete with an emoji. Photos showed an ice pack wrapped around her left knee, but publicly, at least, her spirits looked fine. Her coach gave us the most honest window into what he actually saw on the court. Carl Smesko put it this way, quote, "When I was looking at her, it seemed like she was in a lot of pain, and she wanted to go out there and keep playing because she's competitive and she wants to win the game. I just didn't feel comfortable with it because she looked like she was in a lot of pain," end quote. That single quote tells you two things at once: that Reese wanted to stay on the floor no matter what, and that her own coach didn't trust what he was seeing enough to let her. Here's the part that's created most of the anxiety among fans. No official diagnosis has ever been released. No MRI result. No specific ligament or cartilage finding. Nothing at all. Whole articles got built around that uncertainty, with outlets pointing out that a knee giving out can mean anything from a minor sprain to something far more serious, like ligament or cartilage damage, and that feeling fine in the moment doesn't mean a player is actually cleared to play. We genuinely don't know the medical specifics right now. Anyone claiming otherwise is guessing, because Atlanta hasn't put that information out publicly. That silence becomes part of the story on its own. When a team stays quiet on a diagnosis, fans fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios, because that's what people naturally do with uncertainty. No diagnosis released is not the same thing as a bad diagnosis being hidden, and teams sometimes just take longer to confirm something publicly, especially heading into an all-star break when the roster isn't grinding through back-to-back games. How that break actually played out comes next. Something else was swirling around Reese in the days right before this injury, and it adds context to how much attention she was already under before the All-Star game. Days before the knee injury, Reese found herself at the center of a separate controversy after colliding with Toronto Tempo forward Nyara Sabally while battling for a rebound. Sabally stayed down in pain. Officials called the foul on her rather than Reese, and Tempo head coach Sandy Brondello, frustrated from the sideline, called Reese a, quote, protected species. Brondello is Australian, and in Australian sports vernacular, that phrase sometimes describes a player who gets favorable treatment from officials, but directed at a black woman who has repeatedly faced racially charged criticism throughout her career, it landed completely differently. Reese responded publicly. The WNBA suspended Brondello for 1 game, and Brondello apologized directly, saying, quote, last night, in the emotion of the moment after Nyara's injury, I used a phrase that I shouldn't have used, and I take full responsibility for that, end quote. Acknowledging her words carried an impact beyond what she intended, particularly for black women in the league. Reese later said there's no place for discrimination in the league, and that she appreciated how the WNBA handled it. That story runs separate from the injury, but it shows Reese was already navigating a national media moment before her knee ever buckled. Back to the injury now, and to the moment fans were watching most closely, the All-Star Game. July 25th, 2026, is when the WNBA held its All-Star Game at the United Center in Chicago. Reese suited up, marking her 3rd straight All-Star selection, but her appearance barely lasted. 9 minutes, a game low for the entire event, is all she logged for Team Coop, coached by Becky Hammon, in a 129-122 loss to Team Spoon, finishing the night with 0 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and a miss on her only field goal attempt. With nothing competitively on the line in an exhibition game, Hammon had little reason to push her, and that 9-minute workload lines up with everything else on the record. A team playing it safe with a player who had suffered a scary, undiagnosed knee injury less than a week earlier. On a lighter note, Reese also got her own Barbie doll during All-Star Weekend festivities in Chicago, a nice moment tucked inside all the injury uncertainty. If you're a Dream fan, here's where your head is at by this point. Your star forward's knee buckled twice in one sequence. No diagnosis ever got announced, and she played only 9 minutes in an exhibition game 5 days later. That's a lot of uncertainty to sit with. Then the tone of the conversation changed entirely. Just 10 days after that scary replay, on July 29, 2026, Reese played against the Dallas Wings, and she didn't just suit up, she posted a full double-double, 22 points on 9 of 18 shooting from the field, 0 for 2 from 3, 4 of 6 at the free throw line, and 12 rebounds in an 82-81 Dream win. That's not the stat line of a player on a carefully managed minutes restriction. It's a starter playing real, productive basketball, barely a week after a non-contact knee injury that had fans fearing the worst. Here's the honest answer on where things stand right now. Nobody outside the organization knows exactly what's wrong with Angel Reese's knee, and the public doesn't either. What we do know is the sequence itself. A lower leg issue in mid-July that cost her a game. A far scarier non-contact knee buckle on July 19th against her former team. A coach who kept her out because of the pain he saw on her face. A limited 9-minute showing at the All-Star game 5 days later. And then a full, productive double-double just 5 days after that. Those 2 data points, The cautious 9 minutes and the aggressive 22-point double-double don't add up to a player who's clearly fine, and they don't add up to a player in serious trouble either. They add up to a situation that's genuinely still unfolding, with no official word from the team on what actually happened inside that knee. That's really the through line running through this whole story. This is what happened when Angel Reese's knee buckled twice in front of everyone, and more than a week later, the only people who could actually clear up the uncertainty, the Atlanta Dream Organization, still haven't said exactly what happened. Until they do, anything you hear about her long-term outlook, including whatever's circulating elsewhere online, counts as a guess dressed up as an update. What's certain is the timeline you just heard. A lower leg issue that cost her a game in mid-July, a frightening non-contact knee buckle against her former team on July 19th, a coach who pulled her for her own protection, a cautious 9-minute All-Star appearance, and a full-strength double-double just days after that. The injury, the caution, the comeback, and a stack of unanswered questions sitting in between all of it. If you're a Dream fan feeling anxious watching all this, that reaction makes sense, since the replay is genuinely hard to watch, and the missing diagnosis leaves plenty of room to worry. Based on everything actually confirmed so far, though, the more recent evidence points toward a player still able to play at a high level, not one ruled out for the long term. New information could change that picture, and if it does, we'll cover it. The moment Atlanta releases an official update on Angel Reese's knee, we'll be back to break it down. For now, that's everything that's actually been confirmed.